Brought to you by Charity Mobile. Switch to the phone company that supports your beliefs. All plans start under $50 before taxes and surcharges. Use promo code TRADITION at CharityMobile.com for a special offer.
What you're about to see today is a story from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops that is celebratory in a weird way about something they should never be celebrating. And now they're not lighting off fireworks and doing cartwheels to celebrate this. That would be better in a way, because at least it would be a human reaction, an erroneous one, but it would be a human reaction. Instead, you're going to hear a lot of talk about how processes and systems are working. It's an unhuman reaction. If you've ever read Jack Posobiec's book, which I highly recommend any Catholic interested in the crisis in the church read, Jack Posobiec put a book out last year called Unhumans. I recommend you get it and read it. It will help illuminate a lot of the problems in the church today. But before we get to what the bishops have done, I've been sitting on this one for a few days. I'm going to give you good news to prepare you for the bad. Michael Haynes posted this to X just a couple days ago. The news that Ireland has been reconsecrated to the Sacred Heart for the first time since 1873. Archbishop Eamon, Primate of Ireland, led the ceremony in Knock. Reign in our hearts and homes and in Ireland. Conquer all the powers of evil and bring us to share in the victory of your Sacred Heart. And the Pope, of course, sent his apostolic blessing for the matter. That is good news, and it serves as a good, I don't want to say palate cleanser, but as something to counterbalance what you're about to hear. We're going to go to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, their official website. This was published a few days ago. This is a press release. The U.S. Bishops' Secretariat of Child and Youth Protection releases annual report. U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Secretariat has released their 2024 annual report on the implementation of the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People. I'm going to ask you something here before we dive into this. You're going to hear numbers about how many McCarrick kinds of cases have happened in the Catholic Church in the United States from the end of the fiscal year for the USCCB, which would be June 30th or July 1st, basically from the start of the fiscal year 2023 until the end of the fiscal year 2024. And you're going to hear numbers, and I'm going to ask you, what is the acceptable number for evil deeds inflicted on the youngest types that we associate with McCarrick and priests like him? Now, in our best case scenario, of course, that number would be 0, goose egg, none. In a more realistic sense, what would be acceptable? It would depend. If any number they gave you was one, very, very, very low, double digits at worst, and low double digits, meaning statistically insignificant, some number that showed there wasn't a systematic problem, a system-wide problem in the U.S. church. But the other would require, of course, any of those numbers involving immediate notification of law enforcement and telling the people that law enforcement was involved with this. Or preferably that the Holy Father had reopened Vatican dungeons and sent these monsters to go spend their days there while they awaited some sort of trial in the Vatican. We can hope and dream, but that's unlikely. But some sort of accountability and legal process, that action was immediate. You're not going to hear that. We're going to hear statistics and very bureaucratic language celebrating a reduction in numbers. And to be clear, lower numbers than what had happened in the previous years is a good thing. But is it something to celebrate? Not in the numbers you're about to hear. This is why I was so perplexed when I read this, and so many other people were too. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Secretariat of Child and Youth Protection has released the 2024 annual report, Findings and Recommendations on the Implementation of the Charter for the Protection of Kids and Young People. The report is based on the audit findings of Stonebridge Business Partners, a consulting firm which provides forensic, internal, and compliance audit surveys. So they, as an aside, they brought in a disinterested, what sounds like secular auditory organization to make sure they were doing what they should do. That's probably the best you can hope for, given that we don't have a Holy Inquisition who could do this for them. A survey regarding all allegations of evil things done to the most young and costs that is annually conducted by the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, CARA, at Georgetown University is also included as part of the report. Interesting that they include costs. How much money did it cost? Again, I don't care how much money it costs to keep evil men out of the priesthood and evil men from doing evil things to the most young. This is the 22nd such report since 2002, when the U.S. bishops established and adopted the Charter, a comprehensive framework of procedures to address allegations of evil things done by Catholic clergy to the most young. As an aside, McCarrick's on the thumbnail because in 2002 he was key to the establishment of the Charter. Okay, the wolf was put in charge of the rules designed to control wolves. Again, this is so utterly tone deaf by these guys, it's not even funny. Let's get to the numbers, which I will put on screen for you from Catholic Culture here, because they basically summarize all this. So let's go with what their summary is, because all you want is the quick data. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, Secretariat of Child and Youth Protection, released its annual report, the document that governed the bishops' response to the crisis we've been living through since 2002. The 2024 annual report summarizes data between July 1st, 2023 and June 30th, 2024. Here we go. During that period, the scandal of McCarrick kind of priests cost dioceses and eparchies $242,799,000, including $163 million in settlements, $6.1 million in other payments to those harmed, $63.4 million in attorney's fees, and $4.1 million in other costs. Over the past 11 years, this scandal has cost dioceses and eparchies nearly $2.3 billion with a B dollars. This should put into context all the other discussions of money that you hear from the bishops these days. All their excessive fundraising, their alliances with the federal government they had, that should put this into context. During the 2023-2024 reporting period, this scandal cost religious institutes, that means these are your monks and your nuns, an additional $23,565,000. And that figure is almost certainly low, since only 64% of male religious institutes provided data for the report, meaning that you're probably looking at closer to $30 million. Dioceses and religious communities spent an additional $36.5 million in efforts to protect the most vulnerable in that time. Here are your key reports, your key findings. This is nothing to celebrate. 902 allegations of this kind of evil done by clergy were reported in the time period by 855 survivors and 61% of cases through attorneys. 902 in a 365-day period is almost 3 a day. In the United States, the number of allegations has fallen sharply and steadily since 2019, when 4,400 were lodged in that same time period in 2019. Now, this Catholic Culture article is essentially pulling this right from the data, right completely to this comparison. This is a celebratory action. Among allegations deemed credible, 84% of the allegations involving diocesan clergy and 74% involving members of religious orders entailed James Martin-type problems. I'm a trained social scientist, and I remember looking at one of those reports. I want to say it was the John Jay report back from 2005. I remember finding a copy, and I really wish I still had it, that showed a correlation between the James Martin inclined priests, and those harmed. And the data in social science terminology was as close to a perfect correlation as you will ever see. It was such a good correlation that in the natural sciences, physics, biology, geology, whatever, it would have met their more rigorous standards for finding a correlation that deserved further inquiry. So the social sciences, by the way, have a much lower threshold for a correlation. It's one of the reasons social sciences is such a problem. But this fits the more rigorous standards of the medical sciences and of the nuclear sciences and physics and all the rest of it. I had never seen anything that perfectly correlated in all of my postgraduate and doctoral studies. Never. And the U.S. bishops demanded the John Jay College report have that section edited. Let's continue with the findings. Out of the 902 allegations, 26 involved current year minors. 7 males, 17 females, and 2 were unknown due to lack of detailed information. Of these allegations, 2 were substantiated, 13 were categorized as investigation ongoing, 4 were unsubstantiated, meaning probably no further action taken, and 4 were categorized as unable to be proven. 717 priests had these allegations leveled at them during that audit period. Of the 902 allegations, 7 were deemed credible, 62% as unable to be proven, and 5% is unsubstantiated, and 26% is investigation ongoing. Now, if you know the broader issue, this broader category of crime, this is the kind of thing that if it's not reported immediately, becomes impossible to prove, unless you have like security camera footage. And oftentimes, those who face this harm or their parents don't want to report things immediately. And that's actually part of the training that you're supposed to get, that parishes are supposed to do, is to involve parents, to get them to be notified, or get to train them to be willing to be notified should something happen. The amazing thing about this is the language that they're framing this in, as if it were some victory. Because, yeah, it's obviously good that there's fewer of this thing happening. We're going to go skip down here. You're going to hear this bureaucratic language. Not so much in the preface, but you're going to see this in this is the letter written by the National Review Board. This is a lay group that answers to the bishops. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Your Excellency, for 2024, Stonebridge business partners were again charged with conducting an annual audit of dioceses and eparchies to determine compliance with the charter that was written by Ted McCarrick to protect people from men like Ted McCarrick within the USCCB. Following the audit, the National Review Board is charged by Article 10 of the Charter with reviewing these results and any recommendations therein. The annual report be prepared by the Secretary of Child and Youth Protection. On behalf of the Review Board, I offer the following overall observations and a review. But more importantly, I encourage all to review the report itself, especially noting key observations Stonebridge listed in their comments section. The National Review Board recognizes that participation in the annual audit requires substantial commitment by all participants. 100% true. The bishops are to be commended for continuing to invest in this process, the many resources that the audit evaluates. Through such efforts and full participation, the bishops are able to provide transparent and measurable outcomes. Measuring the charter compliance allows each diocese eparchy to assess strengths and weaknesses and identify programmatic areas requiring improvement, which are critical in our mission of protecting our kids. When taken aggregately, such assessments are only as good as the level of participation. This year, 195 out of 196 archdioceses and eparchies submitted data collection charts. While this is not the 100% achieved last year, the results are still statistically significant and provide a wealth of information to inform church leadership. These high levels of participation certainly demonstrate the commitment of all who participate in the process. And it goes on, talking about how some of the reasons you might not have had full participation. The one thing you're going to see missing in this report is the need for the bishops' conference to put on sackcloth and ashes, to pound their fists into their chests, to do acts of penance and reparation, and to recognize the problem for what it is. You need to get the James Martin types out of the priesthood. The problem is a lot of the bishops are like them. So you're asking the wolves to police the wolves. This is not a bureaucratic problem. Yeah, it's fine to bring in an outside auditor, probably smart to do that. But your outside auditor should probably be Catholic. And they should probably have ways of measuring compliance, not only with the charter, but also pointing out the lack of spiritual religious acts that are dedicated to reparation for this on a metaphysical level, on a spiritual level, and other measures taken to prevent men like this from being in the priesthood. But they won't do it. They can't. The charter was written by Ted McCarrick, among other men. And you're asking a mechanism designed by a man like that to police men like him, to be implemented by men who may not have his most evil inclinations, but many of them are men like James Martin. We know that some of them don't keep to their vows. Remember 90 Tobin? And they celebrate this. Not with cartwheels and fireworks displays in the streets. But they celebrate it as if it was a victory of bureaucratic mechanisms. This is fundamentally an issue of sin, an issue of heresy, and an issue of lack of faith. How often do you hear your bishops in their appeals start talking about why you should donate, and then they start talking about administrative mechanisms instead of the gospel? How often do you know of your pastors, good, well-intentioned priests, often finding themselves locked into the trap of bureaucratic inertia and bureaucratic thinking? I've known good priests at normal parishes who got so wrapped up in fundraising that when they weren't giving homilies or hearing confessions, everything else they did, literally everything else, had to do with fundraising for building projects or some other bureaucratic administrative purpose. And until these bishops address the elephant in the room, which is a lack of belief and a lack of acceptance in the gospel, even the unpleasant sounding to modern ears parts of it, they're never going to address this. And I have an additional report for you here on an example of this. While by their own admission, the U.S. bishops still have wicked McCarrick-type priests in the fold, with hundreds of reports coming in every year, the places where this isn't a problem continue to be punished by the bishops, crushed for holding to the old faith, being rigid in their theology, rigid in their liturgy, clinging to the faith as it had always been passed down to us by heeding the words of St. Vincent of Lerins to avoid novelty. St. Vincent of Lerins, who should be a doctor of the church, warned us that no matter the office somebody holds, if they promote novelty, you are to not listen to them. We are to cling to what has been given to us. He would absolutely tell you that's the case in the liturgy. We go to Rorate Caeli with this headline: 2 traditional pastors removed in under 3 years. Is this what pastoral care looks like? The following article was submitted by a reader to Rorate. We publish it here without further comment. Since the time of the writing, the CBS affiliate in Pittsburgh has picked up the story. Do you have any idea how amazing it has to be for the secular media to start talking about staffing changes at a traditional parish? It's either going to be an extraordinarily slow news day, or it has caused such a ripple and an uproar in the community that the secular media pays attention. This is the kind of thing that is going to keep causing problems with the secular media, actually, for the bishops. I'll remind you, some of the weirdest defenses of the traditional Mass and criticisms of Traditionis Custodes were given by the New York Times and other high-profile secular news outlets. They openly questioned the wisdom of this, saying that most people who go to the traditional Mass are harmless. Why are you wasting your energy on this? Especially in light of that recent USCCB report on McCarrick kinds of problems. Why are they wasting their time on this? Details from the article. Quote, over the last few years, parish mergers have become the norm here in the Diocese of Pittsburgh. Our parish, Mary, Queen of Saints, is comprised of 4 churches in 4 different communities throughout Beaver County. We've been blessed with Benedictine monks from St. Vincent Monastery in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, who have served as pastors and parochial vicars. Our parish has been thriving. Packed churches, young families, an increase of converts to the faith, baptisms, and weddings. In the last 2.5 years, we've had 2 monks, both pastors, removed from our parish by the abbot of St. Vincent Monastery, Right Reverend Martin Bartell, and Bishop David Zubik. These 2 priests, along with the parochial vicars, have been a blessing to our faith community. They are traditional from a liturgical sense and are doctrinally conservative. A few of them were celebrating the traditional Latin Mass at a parish church until they were banned by the abbot, who was ironically our former pastor. Just yesterday, June 16th, it was announced our current pastor, Father Kenice McMullen, who is beloved by most all people in the parish, was being recalled by the abbot and will be returning to monastic life at St. Vincent. He is in his 3rd year of a 6-year assignment. No reason was given. People are outraged over the sudden announcement. From what has been conveyed to me, it is due to a small handful of people who are opposed to their traditional liturgical practices. No use of Eucharistic ministers, no female altar servers, no gift processionals, etc. The formal diocesan announcement read as follows. At the direction of the Right Reverend Martin R. Bartell, Archabbot of St. Vincent Archabbey, the Reverend Kenice McMullen has been recalled to St. Vincent Archabbey for a reassignment effective Tuesday, July 1st. On that day, he will conclude his assignment as pastor of Mary, Queen of Saints Parish. The Reverend John B. Gisler III from Senior Parochial Vicar, Holy Spirit Parish, Lawrence County to pastor Mary, Queen of Saints, effective Tuesday, meaning they're getting a new priest. After receiving significant backlash on social media following this announcement, the diocese then released another statement. We understand and deeply appreciate the affection and gratitude many parishioners feel for Father Kenice McMullen, who has served the faithful of Mary, Queen of Saints Parish with dedication and pastoral care. He is a Benedictine priest of St. Vincent Archabbey. He served at the parish on the recommendation of his superior and with the approval of Bishop Zubik. His transfer is the result of several conversations with Father Kenice regarding personnel matters. To continue to provide the pastoral care for the parishes in the Diocese of Pittsburgh, Bishop Zubik has appointed Father John Gisler, a diocesan priest with experience in parish ministry, as pastor to serve the faithful of Mary, Queen of Saints, during this time of transition. It goes on to talk about how it's a blow to the community and how the bishop is expressing his solidarity with them and all that other nonsense. That is what is allowed to happen. And this happens all the time. In fact, it happens all the time because of what was said in that letter. A few voices, lay voices, were not happy with things and reported it to their bishop. I'll give you another example. I won't identify this parish, but there's a parish not far from me that just experimented with the priest who was very traditionally minded out of Novus Ordo Parish, very traditionally minded. I get the kind that I suspect, if his bishop would allow him to, would offer the traditional mass as one of the options at his parish. He began experimenting with what they called ad deum masses. This would be ad orientem, Novus Ordo masses with the traditional music and all the rest of the things that you expect at a more reverent Novus Ordo, what some people derisively call a unicorn mass. And then they did a survey in keeping with the synodal spirit demanded by the bishop. And most of the people in the parish are happy with it. And so they're going to move forward continuing to do it. But I noticed when I saw the data that about 1 in 4 parish members were not happy with it. And so now I'm going to be paying attention to that parish to see what happens. Because it only really takes 1 or 2 malcontents, spiritual Austin Iveres, to call up the bishop and to complain. And if they're well-known donors, they can pull a lot of weight with the threat of pulling their financial contributions. This happens a lot. Traditional masses, traditional priests punish. Traditional masses pulled. This is the focus of the bishops. Well, they just issued a report admitting that about 2.5 reports a day are still leveled against priests somewhere in the United States. admittedly down from where it had been before, but treating it as if that's a thing to celebrate. 2.5 reports a day. The only number that would be acceptable would be statistically insignificant numbers with an immediate turning to law enforcement or some ecclesiastical equivalent that gets the priest away from anybody with a severe, harsh Vatican Middle Ages style dungeons as their alternative. But instead, the bishops, almost universally across the church in America, are focused on, for whatever reason, crushing traditional Catholicism. And Rome remains silent on this, at least for now. We shall see. Curious what you think about this. Let me know in the comments. This is something, if you know of this happening in your diocese, by the way, if you have reports, letters, emails, whatever of this happening in your diocese, email me, and if there's enough material for me to do it, I will consider covering it on a live stream. Just emails in the description box below. But I'm curious, do you think this is, of course, an indictment of the state of things in the church in America, where the bishops are seemingly applauding, in a bureaucratic sense, their bureaucratic mechanisms, omitting the call for spiritual conversion and admitting the elephant in the room with the sin in question, all the while crushing traditional Catholicism anywhere they can find it? I think that's an indictment of the state of things. Let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It absolutely does help. So does sharing this on social media. That helps too. And if you've ever thought about supporting the work we do here at Return to Tradition, there are options in the description box below. All of them asked for by viewers of this channel. That includes the what was the join button, but now looks like the subscribe with a plus on it. Or, of course, Patreon, Subscribe Star, and all those things. They do help keep these daily messages coming. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.